Good morning. This is Patrick Malley, Chief Academic Officer for Bay City Public Schools. If you're watching this video, then there's a good chance you found our PD course in Google Classroom and are ready to get started on your preparations for a remote start to the 2020-21 school year. On behalf of my entire team in the Office of Teaching, Learning, and Technology, I welcome you. We look forward to guiding your learning over the next 2 weeks and are hopeful that you get much out of what we've planned. Before I jump in, I want to acknowledge that up to our board's vote to start school remotely in Phase 4 last week, my team was preparing for a blended in-person start with frequent intermittent remoteness and the possibility that our region or the state could be pushed back into Phase 3, shutting down our buildings again. The change in direction last month put us again in a situation to plan your professional development in less than a week. I want to be clear. I support the board's decision and am inspired by their leadership to make bold decisions in tough times. I simply want to acknowledge the short turnaround and thank my team immensely for the long hours they've worked putting together what we hope will be a great learning experience for you all. That said, let's get started. In the spring, you'll recall that our primary message to teachers and administrators was to extend grace to our students, their families, and each other. We stressed the importance of expressing compassion over compliance and relationship over rigor. While those things are still important this year, our message to you needs to change to match the increased expectations placed upon us by the state, our community, and ourselves. You'll see this new message in my office's communications to the public as well as embedded in the messages throughout your PD. If we are to be successful at supporting our students through a potentially longer period of remote learning, it's imperative that we provide them with adequate structure to succeed, while also keeping in mind that some families will still need considerable flexibility. As mentioned, the expectations for remote learning need to be higher than they were in the spring when schools were suddenly closed. Over the next 5 slides, I want to highlight the key areas where higher expectations will impact the work this fall. In order for us to account for pupil attendance while teaching remotely, we must remain committed to two-way communication with each student on a weekly basis. We must also be diligent in our documentation of that communication. The Michigan Pupil Accounting Manual defines two-way communication as an interaction between a teacher and a student, or parent if in grades young 5s through 5, where the teacher initiates outreach and the student responds. This communication can occur over a variety of media, such as phone, email, instant message, Remind, Google Meet, Zoom, or face-to-face. When engaging students in two-way communication, it is important that your interaction relates to the class and pertains to course content or progress. For example, it's not enough to inquire about lack of participation. We must stay mindful to go the step further by conveying the impact that the lack of participation is having on learning. You may recall from the spring that we published a learning calendar for families that rotated between math and science with ELA and social studies every other day while providing electives and explore opportunities only on Fridays. While the less is more approach worked during the emergency closure, students will now be expected to have a complete schedule to be considered full-time. The way the Pupil Accounting Manual explains this is by saying that a course cannot generate more or less FTE than a comparable course offered in a traditional format for the district. For example, if a full course load for students traditionally includes ELA Math, Social Studies Science, and 2 Explorers or electives, then it would be reasonable to assume that the remote learning course load should be equivalent to remain full-time. At the same time, each grade level and course is expected to cover the same Michigan content standards that we follow when in school buildings. These expectations do not change because we're remote. As a general rule of thumb, we should plan for elementary students to work an average of 3 to 5 hours each day, and secondary students to work an average of 4 to 6 hours each day. When considering these numbers, please understand that they're not requirements. They're general guidelines to be used for estimating the amount of time a student should be working on classwork. Further, these are not the amount of hours a student should be expected to sit in front of a screen. Remote learning assignments can take many forms, which we'll go over tomorrow. As we prepare for remote learning this fall, it's also important that we plan for students to grow as they would if we had them in a physical classroom. In each subject, students will need to be formatively assessed at the beginning of the year and frequently tracked to ensure that they're making adequate expected growth toward grade advancement or credit achievement. If individuals or groups are not growing, this data will help support further interventions or to help change instruction. Next week, we'll learn more about a new resource called iExcel that will be available to all teachers of English and math that should help with these formative assessments. In the spring, we focus heavily on ensuring students receive feedback, but we discourage the use of grades and credit. This was due in large part to the challenge of grading, advancing, and issuing credit during an emergency school closure that nobody was prepared for. To go remote this fall will require higher expectation to help support high standards and account for student enrollment. This year, student work is expected to be evaluated. For students in grades 4 and up, this typically means grades. At the high school level, those grades will impact GPA, and credits earned will have to be recorded on the student's transcript. At the elementary level, promotion and report cards will need to be based on demonstrated student growth through the work they complete. The fifth way that expectations for remote learning will be higher this fall than they were in the spring is that teachers will be expected to offer a wider range of learning opportunities and supports that provide a mix of self-paced and live learning. For example, while it's good practice to provide students a reading assignment and reflection prompt or question set to complete on their own, it's also good practice to schedule set times you'll be available to help students with questions, or to schedule small group interventions for students who struggled, or to prepare a live presentation to launch the next unit of learning, or just to engage students in group work to encourage collaboration. Like our PD this week, it's through an integration of delivery models that are both self-paced and live that will keep your remote learning classroom both rigorous and engaging. We've chosen to stick with 2 familiar platforms this year. While we know there are many vendors in the e-learning space reaching out to all of us right now, and many of them offer attractive features, we see great value in sticking with what we know for now. What you all achieved last year, given extraordinary circumstances, was inspiring. We look forward to seeing you all build upon what you've started on the platforms you've gotten to know. For grades young 5 through 1st, we'll be again using the paid version of Seesaw. For all other grades, we'll be using Google Classroom. Something you'll find familiar is that the district is again employing a team of teacher leaders to be curriculum assistants. These individuals will be available to support your work. We've identified 2 to 5 teachers per building based upon the size of the school who will focus on supporting remote learning, student-centered practices, and facilitating teacher collaboration this year. While these curriculum assistants will be available to answer questions or to support their colleagues, they will not be creating lesson plans as the curriculum assistants did during the emergency closure. Now that we're all a bit more confident with teaching remotely and have had ample time to reflect on what we did in the spring, it seems logical that this responsibility would be given back to individual teachers this year. Before signing off, let me review what we have planned for you this week. Today is all about soaking in the idea of remote learning this fall and completing your Safe Schools training. Tomorrow, we'll provide a variety of self-paced modules designed to support different aspects of our plan. Next Tuesday, we're arranging with a variety of providers to offer some live virtual PD. On the 26th, you'll work remotely with your colleagues and building principals on school-based aspects of our plan. Both this Thursday and next Thursday have been designated as classroom prep days to allow you adequate time to get your Seesaw page in Google Classroom set up, to prepare parent communications, or to work on your home work environment for the start of the year. To close, I want to again remind you of the goals for remote learning this fall. I've spent much of this presentation talking about new structures that will need to be put into place to ensure that students succeed. I've spent much less time talking about ways we can continue to be flexible to meet family needs. We'll get back to flexibility in more of our training tomorrow and next week. For now, it will be helpful for you to reflect on what I've shared and to apply it to your experience teaching this past spring. As a follow-up to this video, please take a moment to participate in the discussion activity linked below in our Google Classroom. I look forward to hearing your reflections on the year ahead. As always, thank you for all that you do for our students.